Namaskar, good morning, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and professionals, listeners and learners. It is very nice time, nice place that we are appreciating our words, thoughts, and ideas of our culture and language. How language is connected with our culture. Our language becomes the identity of our culture. Dear friends, it is very convenient to understand through language we create and share with others our ways of doing things and ways of being in this world. Our culture, language is a tremendous tool for the organization of particular realities, including a wide variety of social relationships and social systems. Through language, we are continually socialized, we build or resist authority, we worship, argue, and imagine. We name and give meaning to aspects of experience from particular perspectives. For example, members of different cultures can have quite different and local notions of self and strategies of interpretation, including who are authorized speakers and hearers. Language and culture are linked in the transmission of knowledge in the construction of social life, and ideologies about language use and its relation to human behavior. Language plays a vital role in establishing and maintaining what we call culture, including conventions, habits, and interpret, interpretative practices of individuals and communities. Through language, we create and share with others identities, categories, attitudes, values, and beliefs structures. The study how a particular culture uses language can reveal important aspects of society and behavior, including how people organize activities, socialize new members, build or resist authority, use literacy tools, worship, argue, and imagine. Language is not only a rule governed system with its own internal rules and logic, but a system of tools for the constitution of social life, and culture. For anyone acquiring a new language and approaching a different culture, one of the first seemingly simple lessons to be learned are greetings. However, there are complex skills required in properly using greetings, when to say them, to whom to say them, and in what manner, since greetings do complex social work and they reflect and construct complex, multifaceted relationships. Openings and closings of encounters are rich sites for studying the establishment of social relations and other social work in the construction of society, and how these communicative events vary in their structure and meaning across culture. Each culture classifies not only its activities but also its surroundings into categories such as public and private, teaching or learning environment, burial sites, formal and informal, and so forth. Members of communities learn to interpret these frames and what kinds of audiences and languages will be appropriate in each frame and how their possible identities will be relevant. New challenges and contexts have arisen recently through new technologies which can transgress customary frames. For example, with television bringing senses of places and people, both real and fictional, into the home, and with the capability of searching the internet for many types of knowledge and expertise and reaching audiences, both intended and unintended, outside the immediate environment. Language does not simply represent a situation or object which is already there. It makes possible the existence or the appearance of the situation or object because it is a crucial device for the creation of situations and objects. Speakers use language to create reality by naming and giving meaning to aspects of experience from a particular perspective. Thus, language has a normalizing and regulatory function as individuals take up particular positions and stances and produce themselves through language. This is a complex process requiring constant work and negotiation. The close analysis of language, in particular culture, context shows how these meanings are socially and culturally produced. For example, speakers can have quite different and local notions of self and strategies of interpretations. Cultures differ in their ideas about who are authorized speakers and hearers, and about the ability to control interpretation and responsibility for interpretation. For example, the relevance of sincerity and intentionality, as Alice Dorado Durante has shown. Intentionality and responsibility for meaning can be construed quite differently in different cultures. Through the use of linguistic and other communicative resources, culturally relevant meanings emerge and are negotiated through messages that are actually responded to. Meaning is a moment by moment achievement which links past and present, present and future. and forms a context for the future. Through language, cultures create particular realities, including a wide variety of social relationships and social systems. Language and culture are linked, for example, in the following areas in terms of expressing categories such as gender, in marking of certain encounters, and context as formal, such as cultural institutions, the transmission of knowledge, the acquisition of language, multilingualism, identity, ideologies about language use, and its relations to human behavior, literacy, language change, the social values of particular language and social practices, the use of technologies, and the aesthetics of language production and social compartment of communicating with others. Ways of speaking are organized into language genres or categories, which can be easily identified by native speakers. Some examples are greetings, lectures, wordplay, prayer, and conversation. Culturally defined categories or native taxonomies of taxonomies of ways of manipulating communicative symbols are important tools in the analysis of talk as well as ordering social life and practices. For example, who can say what to whom and in what context. Many cultures shares Many cultures share the notion that certain words and phrases are taboo or forbidden in certain context or behavior or between certain members of society. Scholars in a diverse array of the social sciences and humanities are interested in the role of language in society and culture. This includes not only linguistics, anthropologists, and communication scholars, but scholars in ethnomusicology, sociology, psychology, education, cognitive science, media, and performance studies. Many scholars are interested in how language or discourse shapes the emergence and dissemination of ideas over time through multiple contexts, genres, and modalities. Spoken language, written text, and other symbolic forms are important in creating and maintaining cultural practices. Even referential meanings can take on important cultural characteristics, as when a phrase like apple pie, a common dessert in some locales, becomes a signifier for a model home and family. This added signifying and building of common cultural values is a process involving connotative meaning. This is different from denotative meaning, which is the link to something real in the word in less abstract sense. Pie. Advertisers make extensive use of connotative meanings, using the name of an animal such as Jaguar for a brand of car. For example, adds the connotative meanings of powerful, fast, and beautiful. This would be in contrast to the connotative meaning of pig in certain cultures. Cultural definitions of language. An important question is what constitutes communicative competencies in a particular cultures and the notion of language, performance and participation. There is a whistled language called El Silbo in the Canary Island, and smoke signals were once used to communicate over long distances. Language can be defined broadly. Language can be defined broadly to include all forms of speech, signing, writing, song, drumming, horn calling, gesturing, and so forth. In the case of signed languages, properties of a visual language, modality include not only the manual sign system, facial expression also conveys important grammatically, grammatical, affective, and other information. Non-manual expressions such as head movement and eye movement convey important meanings. Some signers in the US also use the mouth in certain conventionalized ways, including in some cases to form the shape of English words together with American Sign Language ASL as another resource for adding meaning. Although grammatical structure are often privileged in the formal study of language, intonation is a crucial feature in spoken languages, influencing how people communicate emotion or affect and other meanings such as enthusiasm or boredom. Intonation is a complex combination of rhythm, volume, and pitch overlaying entire utterances. It is heard by listeners as relative changes in prosodic features. There are important interfaces between verbal and visual cords which are not yet well understood, so called non-verbal behavior or body language. For example, can be an important tool for indicating status as well as emotion and attitude. The role of space in communication can be very important. For example, who is allowed to be in what spaces and who sits where can affect rights and opportunities to talk. Gestures convey important information and can even replace words and serve as an entire communication, but can also be sanctioned in certain contexts and vary considerable cross culturally informed expression and appropriateness of use. There are universal aspects of language and language use and aspects that are entirely culture specific. For example, some languages have a meaning, some languages have a means for grammatically marking statue for marking status relations, as in the well known examples of the French and German, as well as the far more complex Japanese honorific system, but all societies differentiate between specified roles and relations through language. This can take the form of address forms which delineate material status, occupation, or gender, or can take other forms. In the case of grammatically marked status, speakers can indicate their own or other status by choosing specific linguistic elements. A single utterance in Pohonpian, a Micronesian language, can index two separate levels of status aimed at two separate individuals, and one participant's status can be differently constructed by two different speakers in the same interaction. Speakers often face difficulties in deciding which grammatical forms to use to convey relative social position, since a wrong choice can offend the addressee or indicate incompetence on the part of the user. Even when grammatical forms for expressing social status are not present in a language, utterances can be designed to signal difference and hierarchy. As Delheims pointed out, any general theory of the interaction of language and social life must encompass the multiple relations between linguistic means and social meaning. The number of languages in the world is diminishing at a rapid rate, with half of the current inventory of languages estimated in danger of extinction as a result of culture context, colonization, status, and more recently globalization process. When a language dies out, there is a significant loss to the word community and to the next generation in knowledge and culture. Since language is a primary means of cultural maintenance and transmission, an understanding of linguistic diversity serves the understanding of human linguistic processes. Most of the endangered languages in the world have unfortunately not yet been well documented. Identity, race, class, education policies, and economic stratification all can influence process of language extinction or preservation. When a language is adopted for trade, as in the case of Swahili, or is the language of the most powerful group in the case of colonization. This can have an effect on how speakers view the acquisition or maintenance of such a language. Language revitalization efforts encounter many complex challenges, including how a speaker of the language is defined, who is authorized to make decisions about language policies and goals for the community. The fact that no written context may exist in some languages, orthographic issues, the views of the younger generation or younger speakers, and the perceived relationship between the native language and global linguistic markets. Language and identity. The interpersonal the interrelationships between these terms, language, identity, and cultural differences, have become a major focus for many cultural researchers and social theorists. It is known that language, identity, and cultural differences influence each other and are connected closely to each other. Stuart Hall explained the relationship between them in his article, which provided a deeper understanding between the interrelationships among them. This research will review critically Hall's work in the following ways. It will start by discussing the key terms, definitions of language, identity, and cultural differences. Thereafter, Hall's theory regarding the relationships among these concepts will be discussed in detail. The connections between these concepts will be illustrated by providing some personal examples. Furthermore, some limitations where Hall's theory may fail to address will be presented. This review research aims at offering a deeper understanding of the connections between language, identity, and cultural differences, which could assist learners to acquire more knowledge about these concepts for their future studies or works. Language is the principal means whereby we conduct our social lives. Language is the courier, language is the carrier that reflects our identity to others and delivers our culture. Identity is people's concept of who they are, of what sort of people they are, and how they relate to others. Culture is not inherited genetically and cannot exist on its own. However, culture is always shared by society members. According to Hall 1997, there is a strong relationship between the concept of language, identity, and cultural differences. He argued that while culture is concerned about sharing meanings, language is a link that is used to make sense of things, and meaning can be exchanged and produced. He also mentioned that language is essential to culture and meaning and can be considered the key container of the values and meanings of culture. It works through what he calls the representational system. This review will begin by summarizing Hall's 1997 notion of representation, presenting the connection between language, identity, and cultural differences, and the importance of these concepts. Then it will provide some personal and general example to explain the mechanism of that notion. Finally, it will mention some issues that I think Hall may fail to address, which can be considered as drawbacks. Hall 1997 defines the important concept of language, identity, and culture differences and addresses the complicated relationship between them and the differences that may affect these three aspects interchangeably. Hall 1997 argues that language, identity, and cultural differences are strongly connected due to the strong relationship between representation and culture. He mentions that culture as a group of can be used by people to stand and present concept, feelings, and ideas to others. Hall 1997 considers language one of the media that present thoughts, feelings, and ideas in a culture. According to Hall 1997, there are many ways of defining the word culture. Culture can be understood as embodying the best that has been thoughts and said in a society. It is a collection of the best ideas as shown in different classic works of painting, literature, music, etc. He also defines culture through the context of social science, where it refers to anything that is distinctive about the way of life of a community, group of people, or nation. This definition can be known as anthropological. Moreover, culture is used to describe the values that are shared among people or groups in society. Hall 1997 then mentions the cultural turn and argues that culture is not a set of things but a set of practices. The culture here concerns the exchange and production of meanings between groups or societies that have similar interpretations of objects. For example, if two people belong to the same culture, then they interpret the word in roughly the same manner and present their thoughts, feelings, and themselves in ways that can be understood by each other. It can be said that this culture depends on the participants. However, some different interpretations can be formed that are based on social practices. It depends on use It depends on the use and representations of participants that select the language and meaning to be conducted. As a result, belonging and identity are formed when they talk and communicate with others. Some identities are formed by different means. For example, through the mass media, people's identities can be represented to others through producing meaning, incorporating and consuming different events and then regulating them according to social context. On the other hand, identities such as cultural identity are not clearly represented because of the different position of its participants. All 1997. All 1997 refers to the circuit of culture, which consists of five movements: production, consumption, representation, regulation, and identity, and they explain the steps and process of producing meaning in a culture. Production is the first step wherein people create a special meaning of the object. Then they share and consume the meaning of that object among them and regulate the right uses of the meaning to its context. Later on, participants introduce the meaning to others and at the same time they represent it as a special identity or mark. It can be said that there is no starting or finishing point in that circuit because meanings are produced synergetically. Hall mentions that representation by language is central to the process of producing meaning as languages construct the meanings of different objects due to their function as constructional components. Words, sounds, and colors and physical gestures are essential. They have some ideas and concept of objects and can deliver them to others. Thus, the cultural difference is introduced as a consequence. Special identity will be formed because identity is rational. For example, when fans of one football team use a special slogan, they in fact introduce the language that presents their culture and that indicates to whom they belong and their identity in the sense that they are different from the fans of other teams. Moreover, producing new meaning or historical truth can be reflected by the functions of visual language. For instance, when an exhibition shows the objects of other cultures, it may also reflect the identity of people who attend the exhibit and those who are exhibited. All 1997 states that meaning gives us a sense of our identity, including who are and with whom we belong. Meaning is produced and exchanged in every social and personal interaction. Members of the same culture should have and share the same sets of concepts, ideas, and images that let them think and feel about the word and interpret the word in similar ways. They should share the same cultural codes. In other words, ideas and concepts must be shared by members while they speak or have great knowledge of a unified language. Therefore, a conventional view which describes things as they exist in the world according to their natural characteristics and materials in the first, then according to their representation can be changed by the cultural turn, which means that meaning is created rather than existing. The role of representation appears in the social constructional approach because culture is considered one of the fundamental points in the process. According to Hall 1997, language presents a general frame of how representation and culture work. He mentions two approaches. The semiotic approach deals with how representation works and with how language produces meanings, and the discursive approach is concerned with the effects and results of representations. He adds the constructivism, which is a model of its approaches. Semiotics and discourse can display the effects of representation, knowledge, and relationships with power, as well as a historical specificity. Furthermore, he believes that there are No wrong or right meanings because meanings change according to its usage, context, and historical events. They are governed by power, emotions, and feeling, so they play a big role in identifying others in terms of excluding or including them, especially once identity is marked out by difference. To conclude, the notion of Hall 1997 concentrates on the representation, which is considered an important and essential factor that plays a major role in forming the complicated process between the three aspects of language, identity, and cultural difference. It also focuses on the representation process that shapes ideas, feelings, and concepts in a simple, interpreted form by the use of correct meaning in a culture. While meaning is exchanged between participants using the same shared cultural codes, they can communicate and reflect their culture and identity to others. Examples for illustrating the relationships. There are several examples that support Hall 1997 notion of the connection between the concepts of language, identity, and connection, cultural difference. Three examples are provided to explain that connection. The first example is personal from my own life and happened to me when I was living in a Western culture, specifically in Australia a few years ago, while the second example is from the daily life and interaction in Saudi Arabia. And the last example will be from my religion, which is Islam. First, when we as Saudi people go to shops such as a grocery store to buy some goods like dates or coffees, usually we ask the seller about the quality of the products by asking this simple question: is it good? This question asks whether the goods are in a high quality. When I was in Australia pursuing my master's degree a few years ago, I remember that I went to an Australian grocery store with a little English language to buy some Mexican dates that I found. I just picked up the dates and asked the seller the same question that I used to ask it in Saudi Arabia: is it good? The sailor looked at me and with an angry face and said, "What do you mean by saying is it good?" I was really surprised by his tough reaction and tried to explain the meaning of the question. The sailor might interpret my question wrongly and thought that I was doubting about the quality of his goods and stuffs. From this example, we can see the difference between Saudi and Australian cultures and also the different meaning given to the words "is it good?" In Saudi Arabia and some other Arabic countries, this means that the product is of high quality, while in some other communities or cultures it may not mean anything or it may mean something else. I think Hall 1997 was right when he mentioned that meaning gives us a sense of identity, like who we are and with whom we belong. Meaning is produced and exchanged in every social and personal interaction through the use of language. Members of the same culture should have and share the same sets of concept, ideas, and images. I think that statement is correct because as Saudi share the same ideas and concept in our daily interactions, and when we try to apply these reactions in another society or community, it may not work. It may not work or be understood by others according to the different cultures and identity. The second example is from our daily interaction and life in Saudi Arabia. People in every society and community express some special behavior or reaction to show some kind of aspects when they deal with others. In Saudi Arabia, we have been taught by our parents and teachers to receive things from others using only our right hand when we deal with them because it's considered respectful and polite. For example, if I visit my friend in his house and he hands me a cup of coffee or tea, when then I have to get it with only my right hand. Even when we want to have some food, we have to use only the right hand for eating because we follow the instruction of Islam. The Messenger of Allah, may Allah bless him and grant him peace, said to me, say the name of Allah and eat with your right hand and eat what is in front of you. Although some other cultures consider receiving things or eating with the left hand to be normal, we would consider one who uses his left for eating or receiving things impolite or disrespectful. Therefore, from this example, we can see the difference in culture and difference in meaning that given to this reaction. This custom of getting things by the right and or even eating by the right hand is considered polite and respectful in some cultures, while other cultures may not consider it a big deal. The meaning of this custom, of course, gives us a sense of our identity which distinguishes us from others. So we regulate a cultural concept that was originally generated by our parents and ancestors and also represent it through language, interaction, or even through our facial expressions. The last example is from my religion, Islam. Islam is similar to many other religions in that it is based on several foundational principles. Shaking hands and expressing a long greetings in Arabic is one of these principles. When we as Saudi meet other Arabian or Muslim people, we usually greet them by shaking hands with the right hand because that's considered a sign of a good relationship between us. This is one custom that forms our identity. If someone does not respond to other greeting or shake hands, that means there is something wrong or something strange is happening, and that person may be angry or in a bad mood. So we try to get an explanation from him and help him if he has any problem with his life. This behavior may be totally different from what is shown in the West because of the cultural difference, and people in the West may find the behavior strange or misunderstand it unless we unless they receive an explanation. From this point, we as Saudis produce this specific concept and consume it, shaping our identity and representing it through the use of our language. Dear friends, as we have gone through language and culture, since the beginning of the different cultures in the world, in all the holy religions of this holy land, especially about our nation, if we talk, our India is the most ancient cultural, most ancient cultured country of the world, which represents in the different languages at the different time. Undoubtedly, we see a lot of words, thoughts, ideas in our holy scriptures that are commonly connected with nature. In the presence of nature, all the holy religions of this holy land were written in the presence of air, fire, soil, sky, and water. So there are so many similarities and resemblances on the basis of teachings of the different religions. Throughout the all holy scriptures of the world, we can get this thing that there is the presence of Lord or God in the world and even in wordless form of person, place, and thing. So it is the sum up of all these ideas and thoughts that we have discussed. Thank you. Nice to see all of you.